This is Charter California Edition, and I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Steve Adams. He is a Riverside City Council member, also a candidate for the United States Congress. So I want to speak about Riverside before we speak about federal issues. Riverside suffered some difficult days over the last few years. Right. Not as difficult as some communities in the Inland Empire, but talk to us about what Riverside was facing 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
When the economy started to go down, and we had the bubble burst, our main industry was house building and agriculture. Both are cyclical, and both took a major hit. So we decided we needed to change the industry of Riverside. So we went to high tech, and we brought in a medical school. And in so doing, we've transformed Riverside completely. And in fact, on Monday, in an independent study through Arizona State, we were named the #1 job creator in the nation. So we completely transformed Riverside from a down cycle to up. And the jobs we brought here are non-cyclical. They're year-round and don't cycle out.
Why? What went right?
We were fortunate because early on in that bubble bust, we saw it coming, but nobody perceived it to being as big as it was. But we saw it coming, we started to downsize, and immediately started working towards making Riverside competitive with the rest of California, because it's California internal fighting for jobs, but also to bring those types of jobs that are high-paying jobs, that are not cyclical, they're year-round. High-paying jobs create middle-paying jobs, which create entry-level jobs, and we have that full gamut of people, and now we're starting to fulfill that philosophy.
I know it's not your style to criticize other cities, but I need to ask you about San Bernardino. It is 20 minutes down the road. It's that close. And that city has been ravaged by the downturn. They are bankrupt. It's 20 minutes down the road. How is it that Riverside has managed to do so much better than a city of relative similar size, relative similar makeup? How?
I think part of it is, when I was a young man, and even back when I was on the police department, San Bernardino was kind of like the big city. They had the mall, they were successful, they were thriving, and they started to cater more to the lower income people in lieu of, and this is that part of it, the rich versus the poor. They stopped being job creators, and they started pandering to a different category.
Well, we know
whereas Riverside said, let's bring quality jobs here, so that they'll hire people and raise our standard instead of lowering our standard. So we've moved it up. Again, this goes back to our looking for high-tech jobs, medical industry that's never ending and creates several offshoots. And then those people are looking for services and restaurants and retail, all those things to service them, to keep them here. And that's what we've done. And it's completely transformed us. Our economy is constantly moving up, even though slowly.
There's no question that a single year doesn't turn a city around one way or the other. And yes, San Bernardino has been struggling for many years. Norton Air Force Base, the demise of the Norton Air Force Base was a real problem for San Bernardino. But still, I continue to be amazed. Riverside did have its renaissance, and that money helped. It was put through before the recession hit, but the money was there to be spent during the recession. We're on the other side, and Riverside continues to flourish, and San Bernardino continues to suffer. Why? I'm going to push
We run Riverside like a business. We don't spend more than we take in, and we evaluate where we should go and where we shouldn't go. At one point, we were looking towards bringing in a lot of warehouses, because you see these big boxes and people perceive that as success. It's not. It's the fewest number of jobs per square foot that you could have with the most negative impact and no revenue towards the city. When we went to the other types of jobs, we've condensed that to the highest number of jobs per square foot, high-paying jobs that pay taxes and do revenue because they shop here, they eat here, they live here, and it's for the region. The whole region has benefited. When we, March Air Reserve Base became March Air Reserve Base, we lost a lot there. It's still our #1 employer and revenue producer. The medical school will match March before very long.
Where do you go from here? Because it has been, a fairly good few years despite the recession. The medical school is open. Does the city continue to build out? Does it start annexing unincorporated areas? How does Riverside continue to flourish?
Annexation right now is not a good idea. That's a lot of money out rather than money in, because you have to provide services to that, and it just won't generate the money to cover that. So our best bet is to continue doing what we're doing, bringing in quality jobs here, bringing in the quality of life that people will look to bring high-paying jobs into corporations here, so they can have the lifestyle they left someplace else but enjoy it here for a lot less money.
But Riverside is in that kind of middling size, 300,000 residents. So you're not a small city, but you're not quite Long Beach yet, which is almost 500,000. And I feel like you got to go one way or the other. I mean, San Bernardino went the other way. They're now down to 200,000. So what happens?
That's why we do a regional approach. We bring in Moreno Valley, Paris, Meade Valley,
Other
River
incorporated
Valley,
cities.
and bring those in so that we work together to complement one another, so one doesn't get overloaded, that we all grow together, we all benefit from one another, because we are the Inland Empire. That's the other California. We have to compete with those cities that have that nice waterfront deal, but we can do that, and we have done that. We've brought a quality of life, plus proximity. We're 45 minutes from anything you want to do. And nobody else can make that statement.
You mentioned Jurupa Valley.
Yes.
That's a new city.
Yes, it is.
That is on the verge of disincorporation. Really not so much as a fault of their own, but because of certain state laws that were changed that prevented VLF, vehicle license fees, from coming in. It is a neighboring city.
Yes.
Is it time to start looking at Jurupa Valley? I mean, and I know you say annexation's not a good move right now, but if they're going to disincorporate,
they're going to go back to probably, there's still a fight.
There is.
And a very slim chance the VLF will come back, vehicle licensing fees, that could actually save them. But I think the time has almost run out. If that doesn't happen, they'll go back to an unincorporated city. It'll take a few years to get that process done. That's something Riverside can look at, but we have a physical barrier, and that's called the Santa Ana River.
Right.
It really makes it difficult for us to take them in, but it's not something we could overlook. And there may be an opportunity that benefits both their community and our community, and bringing them together. We're trying to do that now, partner with them to bring some things there that will help them generate revenue, maybe to help them survive, because we don't want to see them fail. Any failure in the Inland Empire reflects on all of the Inland Empire.
when we spoke last, we spoke a bit about foreign affairs.
Right.
We know that the foreign affairs landscape has changed dramatically just since we spoke last. As we speak today, events are moving quickly.
Yes.
But what we do know is that Russia has all but annexed, if not annexed, the Crimea. Query whether it's within their national interest to do that. You can look at a map. It can, you can look at it a lot of different ways. But we do know that the West, including the United States, has opposed that annexation. What do you make of the crisis in the Crimea?
Well, I believe that President Putin has annexed in.
Right.
Whether we recognize it or not,
Yes.
it is a reality. I think there's a buildup. This is just a prediction, not based on anything other than my following of this, that they are going to try to go into eastern Ukraine, because they have
ethnic
the oil,
interest. Well, that too. Yes.
that oil line that they have to protect, because that's essential.
And it's a Soviet line.
Yes, it is. It's theirs, and that line serves Europe or Western Europe, which is why some of our allies are reluctant to get in, because they are dependent on that Soviet oil. They're also now, as you understand, the Soviet Union is kind of running the Middle East oil lines.
Right, the Russia now.
Russia, right.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to make sure that our allies are protected from that. And this goes back to, I think, energy independence here. I don't have time today to tell you all that,
but
all
you'll
that
come
type
back.
of stuff, but yes,
Will you come
absolutely.
back? Okay, his name is Steve Adams. He is a member of the Riverside City Council. He is a candidate for the United States Congress. That district includes Riverside, Moreno Valley, and Paris, correct?
Yes, sir.
My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is Charter California Edition.
During the last decade, out of 265 congressional elections in California, how often did the incumbent party's candidate win the election? In the last decade, the incumbent party won 264 out of 265 congressional elections in California.
This is Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Paul Zellerbach. He is the district attorney in Riverside County. And so I want to speak with you about our children. our teens, our youth, obviously we know it is pivotal that we teach them right from wrong early on. And you have been working to intervene with some of our youth so that they get put on the right path. You have some very innovative programs. I want to talk about a few of them. One of them is focused on truancy, and I'm sure you know that Kamala Harris, the state's Attorney General, held a pretty significant press conference recently to talk about the ills and the negative ramifications of truancy.
I was there with her on that
You
occasion.
were, so thank you for that. Talk to us about it
Well,
before we talk about the team.
Absolutely. Having been involved in the criminal justice system in Riverside County for 36 years, 25 years as a prosecutor,
Right.
11 years as a Superior Court judge, I've really come to realize that our best hope or chance at changing criminal behavior is with our kids. We get the biggest bang for our buck there. And so we're focusing now, one of our programs, on truancy, children that are habitually truant from school. I know from when I was in school that if the kids aren't going to class, they're usually getting into trouble. So we want to focus on those kids and address habitual truancy. We bring the families in, we talk to the parents.
But if you can, before we talk more about this team, be as specific as possible about what happens with truant kids. We've seen it anecdotally, but you know, on the ground, what truancy causes.
Well, statistics tell the story.
Right.
Look at our state prison inmates throughout California. 70 to 80% of the inmates in state prison currently don't have a high school diploma.
Why don't they have it?
Because they were truant. And the problem is you get so far behind that you can never catch up. That's more frustrating, and they just give up and quit.
So tell me about your youth accountability team, which looks to attack truancy head on.
Correct. We've created these youth accountability teams throughout Riverside County. It's a collaborative effort with the school districts, with the probation department, with law enforcement, the school resource officers, as well as my prosecutors. And again, we identify habitually truant kids, we bring them in, we bring the parents in, and we provide them resources, counseling, education, to make sure that the parents understand that they have a legal obligation.
Isn't it true that in California, parents can be charged with some criminal liability for truant kids?
They can be criminally prosecuted
Right.
for not making sure that their children are in the class.
Sure,
And
sure.
they're not aware of that oftentimes.
Right, right.
When you have a DA sitting across the table informing them of this, that has quite a helpful
Right.
effect upon them.
So how do you create an atmosphere, an environment whereby you're getting the message across without the inevitable, I'm just being spoken at, I'm not being spoken to, they're speaking at me?
You have to identify what the problem is or what the issues are, because oftentimes when kids aren't going to school or are truant, there's problems at home. And so we offer services, counseling services for the parents as well as for the kids, and we look deeper than just why aren't you in class, but what's causing that to occur. We can provide transportation for parents that can't get their kids to school because they're single parents or they're working or whatever. So it's had a great effect.
Any success stories of which you're most proud?
You know, I'll get to that in a minute,
Okay.
but this is just one of our juvenile justice programs.
Okay, can we talk about another one? I want to jump, if I may, sort of youth court. It just feels like a natural progression.
It is.
Yeah, tell us about youth court.
Youth court is very close to my heart because I participated in youth court when I was a Superior Court judge. And what we deal with is probation identifies kids who have committed low-level crimes.
What would they be?
Trespassing, fighting,
Shoplifting?
Shoplifting, exactly. And rather than having them go through the criminal justice juvenile court process, we divert them and have them go through the youth court program, wherein basically we have kids as the prosecutors, kids as the defense attorneys, kids as the jurors, and then you have a real-life judge sitting as over the trial proceeding. And so the case is presented to the kids that are in the jury box, and they decide the punishment.
Who are the jurors? I know you said they're kids, but who are they?
They're kids that have previously gone through the program. Part of their agreement to go through this program is ultimately, once their case is heard, then they have to come back and sit as jurors in another child's trial.
Are the defendants, I'll call them, aware that their jurors are prior?
Absolutely. And you have the parents that come in and watch this juvenile trial,
Sure.
and they love it.
What type of sentences do the children receive?
It could be anything from cleaning up the graffiti, writing a letter of apology to the victim. We have a Scared Straight aspect where we take them through a tour of either the juvenile hall or a county jail facility. So it's multifaceted and has quite the good effect.
Successful?
On them. Yes, absolutely.
Any stories that you can tell us?
Well, no, but these kids, they get excited about it, and oftentimes a lot of these kids that go through the youth court program then become involved in the high school mock trial program.
I did moot court in law school. I
So
will
it,
say that.
it feeds on itself.
Right. I want to talk about another program you have. It's called Project Safe Neighborhoods.
Correct.
There is a youth element to it, but as well as an adult element. Am I correct?
Right. Again, here we're trying to address at-risk youth that are heading in the wrong direction with respect to getting possibly involved in gang activity or the gang lifestyle.
Right.
And to address that problem, you need to talk to the children, and oftentimes we'll bring in reformed gang members to talk to the kids who can really relate to them. But we also bring in the parents and educate them and tell them how to deal with kids that might be headed in that direction. So it's multifaceted. It's both an education, intervention, and prevention program.
What's interesting, though, about a program like this is I would think intervention needs to be even earlier than the accountability team or the youth court.
Well, interesting you brought that up. Right now, our Project Safe Neighborhood program is in the high schools and junior high schools. And now all the school districts and the educators want us to start in the 3rd or 4th grade
Right.
with these kids.
Because in the final analysis, gang members, I hate to say it this way, but they can be seen as heroes if presented in the wrong light. And
No
so-
question, and oftentimes they replace the family.
Right.
It's a sense of belonging.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's belonging to the wrong group or the
Right.
wrong family.
And so if you're able to insert the message that gang members are not heroes, they're not valiant at 3rd and 4th grade, I would think that could stick.
And they don't have your best interest at heart.
Right, I mean, by 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it can be a little more challenging.
And they've got it already by that point in time. Just in the last 18 months, we had 500 presentations countywide.
Right.
We talked to 42,000 youth and parents.
Talk to me about those reformed gang members that are telling their stories.
We have one reformed gang member who was shot in a drive-by shooting several years ago, and now he's a paraplegic. He comes in his wheelchair. He has tattoos all over his body and his head, and he talks to those kids and says, this is what can happen to you if you continue in this lifestyle. You could be sitting in this wheelchair. It's very powerful and very effective and very moving.
Why do you think he does that?
Because I think he realized too late in his life that he made some mistakes that cost him his legs, basically. And he doesn't want to see other kids go down that same life path.
So here's the most important question of all, possibly. Do you believe these programs work? Do you actually see a drop in juvenile arrests, convictions, filings, whatever it may be?
I asked myself that same question. And so we looked at 2012 statistics versus 2013 statistics, because that's what tells you if you're being effective.
Right.
And just in the last year, our juvenile filings, criminal complaint filings against juveniles went down almost 25% in Riverside County.
Are these programs newer programs so you can attribute?
Absolutely. These are programs that never existed in the Coachella Valley or southwestern Riverside County, and I've expanded the programs and improved them, increased the number of prosecutors involved in these programs, and here we're seeing tremendous results.
And do you intend to expand that even further? I mean, the numbers don't lie.
We have to. As you pointed out, if we're going to talk to kids in the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grades, we got to do it.
His name is Paul Zellerbach. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. He is running for re-election. That election will be held in June 2014. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is Charter California Edition.
What percentage of elementary school children in California were truant in 2012-2013? According to the California Attorney General, 29.6% of elementary school children, or 982,352, were truant in 2012-13.
It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Stan Sniff. He is the sheriff for Riverside County. He's running for re-election. That election will be held in June 2014. And so I want to speak with you about the role of the Sheriff's Department.
Sure.
Talk to us about the distinctions between communities that are incorporated and communities that are unincorporated as it relates to the sheriff.
Well, the legal responsibility for all of the 58 sheriffs in California, one for each of the 58 counties, is to deal with criminal investigations in the unincorporated area. That's the area outside the city jurisdictions.
Got it.
In Riverside County, that's about 400,000 people that live on mountaintops, remote desert areas, just outside of cities all over. Our responsibility is to do the criminal investigation, and we work with our brothers and sisters in the Highway Patrol who handle the traffic safety responsibilities, acts investigation and enforcement.
In Riverside County, as an example, there are 28 cities.
Correct.
11 of those cities currently have their own police departments.
Yes.
17 do not.
Right.
For the 11 that have their own police departments, what is the role of the Sheriff's Department in that case?
Well, for those that have their own police department,
Yes.
those police departments end up working with the sheriff because we operate with regional task forces because the crooks obviously don't recognize boundaries.
Of course.
So we're heavily invested in the Sheriff's Department and some 35 different teams and task forces with other agencies, federal, state,
Sure.
and local. So we also provide mutual aid, and they also reciprocate by also helping us in some areas when we need help.
But as a general proposition, for cities that have their own police departments, it is their responsibility to handle criminal matters.
Criminal, traffic, and enforce local ordinances, right.
For the 17 that do not, and this is common in all 58 counties,
Yes.
where the smaller cities usually will contract with the Sheriff's Department to provide what?
They provide the full police services, the criminal investigations, the traffic safety component, and enforce local ordinances. And it becomes very, very cost effective for them because it provides almost like a form of outsourcing. It provides also a turnkey mechanism for them to get all those police services, a piece of a very large professional
Right.
organization at a very cost effective rate.
And what's interesting is, in areas that are incorporated in which you have been contracted to provide services, you actually provide more services than in unincorporated areas because you're dealing with the traffic.
Correct, and they're also more heavily staffed because if you stop and think about some of our jurisdictions, one of our stations, our Hemet station as an example, in the unincorporated area has 800 square miles of responsibility. So those are very long distances, very remote areas, some built up areas, but the density of officers, of deputy sheriffs out in those areas is entirely set by the board, and it's discretionary on how many officers they want. Because of the budget cuts, you remember a few years ago,
I do.
we went down to minimum staffing to save the county money. And that literally meant boots on the ground, 2 or 3 deputies for 800 square miles.
But if you're in a contractual situation, when you are with cities, the Board of Supervisors cannot get involved in that, correct?
Exactly. There is no cost to the county taxpayer. There is a cost to that community. All the resources they're paying for go directly into that city. And they can literally pay for any level of service they want, and they in fact do. It widely varies. If they have the resources, if they want to put a deputy sheriff, city police officer on every street corner, they could do that. Very expensive.
You don't make a profit per se.
No, we don't make a profit per the government code at all. So they're getting our direct costs and our large set of shoulders. So that's what creates that economy of scale.
Let's talk about the Inland Empire more specifically. As we know, a few cities have had difficult times. San Bernardino, outside of your county, declared bankruptcy. There was a discussion about whether that city should contract with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. At this stage, they have not. There is a city, though, in Riverside County that is struggling a bit. Some have argued it's on the verge of bankruptcy. I'm not going to comment because I don't know. But what we do know is Desert Hot Springs is considering whether they should shut down their own police department, because they're one of the 11 with their own,
Right.
and contract with the Sheriff's Department.
Correct.
Talk to us about that process. It is a painful one often for cities to do that because there is a certain pride that cities and their residents will have in their own police department.
Oh, absolutely. And the issue of identification and uniqueness is something that we also do in our contracting services as well. So the city seals, the word police instead of sheriff, and not all the cities do the same thing. We do have some of our contract communities that prefer to have the word sheriff.
Oh, I see,
Norco
right.
is probably the most notable of those.
Right.
That likes its Old West heritage.
Ah,
on
yes,
that.
right.
But the reality is what we'll do is sit down with the existing police department staff, and they are facing some severe fiscal issues.
Right.
And we'll work out the types of crimes they have, the response times, how they end up dealing with that. We'll assimilate all that information and we'll create a proposal. And that proposal will go back in probably about 2 months to
And
the
they've
city council.
they've asked for a proposal.
They formally asked, and that's public knowledge.
It is possible that you could retain a significant portion of the current members of their department. Is that correct?
Typically what happens is, and we've done this in a number of other communities that face a number of different variety of issues of their own concern, but when we end up taking over a community's police department and policing services, many of them will apply with us, some of them will not, but many of them will apply with us, and those that can meet our standards will be taken in and provided jobs in our department.
What's interesting is you look at some of the communities that you currently police in the Cncl Valley, and they tend to be safer communities. Desert Hot Springs, I don't mean to cast aspersions, but they do have higher crime rates than some of the other communities that you police. How does that play into the calculation about whether you take over services?
It doesn't play any role in it. They're all my constituents, whether they have their own police department, and we have all the police departments that we're working side by side are great agencies.
Sure.
But they're still my constituents as a sheriff because I'm elected by all 2.3 million.
But meaning when you put out a bid, do you notice their crime rates and recognize that it may be a little more challenging to police Desert Hot Springs as opposed to Cathedral City for a day?
We do that, but each of the staffing levels that we contract for vary from city to city. Some of them are very heavily staffed because they have the ability to pay, and some of them need to be a little bit more than low staffed because of those crime issues you mentioned. So that's taken into account.
It may feel obvious, but do explain to us why you can save a city money, you meaning a sheriff's department can save a city money by taking over policing services versus the city maintaining their own police services.
Well, typically what happens is agencies, and it's not a derogatory comment,
Right.
but many of them get quite top heavy. The department operates very leanly, and if you stop and think about the way our contracting services operate, they're literally sharing sometimes sergeants. They get their equivalent of what they need, but sometimes to actually run a standalone agency, you've got to have a lot of extras. They absorb all their own workers' comp issues and so on. What we end up contracting for is a service level. So if you have somebody off on workers' comp, that becomes my problem. I have to have a replacement.
And presumably, I don't know the geography specifically of Desert Hot Springs, but if there are contiguous communities and you are serving those communities, would you be able to, economies of scale, create crossover?
No, we don't commingle resources, but the sharing of resources, rather than having 7 or 8 separate sergeants to run a standalone operation,
I understand.
we can sometimes do that with 5 or 6. So they're actually only getting exactly what our staffing ratios drive, as opposed to the artificiality of trying to do a standalone police department.
So even if two cities have contiguous boundaries and you police both of those cities, there will be separate deputies assigned.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because their resources have to be expended in their city. And it becomes, once you end up blurring, and that's what creates the challenge when a separate police department, which could legally do it, contracts with a neighboring city.
Oh, they could?
Oh, yes. The problem always fundamentally goes down is the officers are normally driven by calls. And so where the crime is where the officers, and then one community typically feels is subsidizing the crime in another community. We firewall off all those separately.
And
so
you still have economies of scale?
we have a huge economy of scale. So we're talking in our patrol force, the Sheriff's Department of Riverside County is so massive, not in courts, jails, coroner, just in the patrol force, that you could put all 11 separate police departments, stack them end on end, throw in all the highway patrol stations in Riverside County, the 3 campus police departments, and just our patrol operations dwarf all those put together. So that's a massively wide set of shoulders.
His name is Stan Sniff. He is the sheriff for Riverside County. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is Charter California Edition.